Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Nagorno-Karabakh fell to the Muslims of Azerbaijan with nary a peep from the supposedly Christian West. Some Judeo-Christian nations even helped to arm the Azeris in their ethnic cleansing of Christian Armenians from their ancestral homelands in the Artsakh region. And now as the months roll by, the Muslims are now rubbing salt into the wound by tearing down Christian churches and building mosques upon the rubble, making it very clear as to what this whole saga is really about. New satellite imagery from the Caucasus Heritage Watch, which is supported by Cornell University, shows only debris where the St. John the Baptist Church once stood since it was built in 1847. Its neighboring village was likewise razed to the ground. Plans are already in place for new settlements to be built so that Muslim Azeris can occupy the land of the Christians, and the president of Azerbaijan believes the area's new mosque should be finished by the end of summer this year. Our next guest asks, in the wake of all this, must Armenia cede itself into non-existence? Joining us now to discuss is Raymond Ibrahim, the author of many popular titles, including his most recent work, Defenders of the West, the Christian Heroes Who Stood Against Islam. Raymond, thanks for being here tonight.
Good to be with you, Kara.
Great. So many in the Christian West don't really know what's happening to Armenia and to its Christians. So can you catch us up to speed on where we are now that it seems Armenia is even having to cede territory after all those other Armenians were already ethnically cleansed from the Artsakh region?
Well, that's the thing. I think the best way to understand this is by stepping back and getting a more panoramic view, which most people don't do, and definitely the news doesn't do that. It just focuses on the now and the last few years. And as you described earlier, basically, war broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020, late 2020. And it's been just one nonstop roller coaster for Armenia having to cede territory. So first it had to Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh, as they call it. Azerbaijan actually blockaded it for months, and to the point that it was called a genocide by various human rights organizations in the UN. Because people were emaciated and starved. And then in September, Azerbaijan launched another raid inside and basically evicted all these half-starved people out. And it's amazing because if you see the pictures of them, it's almost identical to pictures of Armenians from over a century ago on death marches during the Ottoman Empire under that particular Turkish iteration. It's very similar. And at any rate, people thought that now that Nagorno-Karabakh is completely under Azerbaijan's rule, that would be the end of it, but it's not. And Azerbaijan continues border hostilities to the point that the Armenian prime minister, who's not exactly popular, has ceded more territory. And these are all ancient Armenian lands. You mentioned the St. John the Baptist Church that's been there since 1847 or so forth. It's obliterated without a trace. And like you said, they're building a mosque, but that's not the only place. So many churches in any region that was Armenian and that is now under Azerbaijan has been completely destroyed, turned into a mosque. And it's even more obvious when you look at what happens to ancient Christian cemeteries. They just obliterate them and turn them into parking lots as if there's no trace whatsoever. So it's a very much identity war. This isn't so much, people will look at our nationalities, Armenians versus Turks, but really it's the religion that defines all this. And you can see it in the way that the Azerbaijanis and the Turks before them are just so committed to erasing, the cross, the symbol of the cross, and churches and anything that invokes Armenian heritage, which is, of course, Christian heritage, being the oldest Christian nation in the world.
And also in your article, you talk about Armenia being the oldest nation, one of the oldest nations in the world, and of course, the oldest Christian nation in the world. And of course, Turkey being the Muslim power that it is, and Azerbaijan also being its little, Muslim puppet that it has in the region, that they don't exactly like being neighbors to such a nation with such a long storied history as Armenia. So could you walk the audience as well through some of the history of Armenia going back, a millennia or two?
Yeah, well, actually, we can go back to 2700 BC when Yerevan was the capital of Armenia. And it's just comical because Azerbaijan, it just came into my mind. I'll go back and give some more context, but Azerbaijan, which became a nation in right around 1900, didn't even exist as a nation until then, claims that we also have to get Yerevan because it's our birthright.